had mentioned women end up having more issues hormonally.
About 80% of women have hormonal imbalances. For men, cholesterol is your building block for hormones.
But then also, too, the more applicable thing of like, all right,
what do I do?
Yeah.
It's the simple things like...
There are some propagandas out there that are intentionally out there for profit to keep you sick.
Yeah, I mean, the big one right now is...
What's going on, Wealth Builders? Today, we're talking about biohacking in 2025, and I've got an expert in that, Dr. Austin Lake. What's up, man?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me out here.
Yeah, dude. So you were here at the biohacking conference.
Yeah.
Then we golfed.
Yes.
And we had a miraculous comeback.
Thanks to you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Had a, what were you, a 2 under in the back 8?
Yeah. So we pulled off the miracle.
Yeah.
So let's talk about biohacking, and maybe golf is part of biohacking. Maybe we can make it
about golf. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But man, you were talking about some things on the course. You were talking about like nicotine and how that's kind of like not what people think.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of other things going on. It seems like there's just new research every friggin' quarter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's new research. I think the problem is there's so much research, and depending on who's funding it, depending on who's promoting it, it may not ever reach the surface to where you and I hear about it, right? And so unless you start digging into some of these topics, you're never going to find out about what other opinions are on these topics.
Yeah. And I think also, too, what's interesting about your opinions is you're coming at it from a Christian standpoint as well. And so I'm curious how that affects your bias on certain things.
No, it definitely...
Especially like something like nicotine.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, being a Christian, talking about nicotine. So immediately you hear nicotine, you're going to think a lot of negatives. You're going to think lung cancer, you're going to think cancer in general. But the problem is a lot of this research looking at nicotine is looking at combining it with smoke or tobacco products. That obviously has a negative effect on your lungs and other systems. And so that by itself is not really a part of the conversation. If we're just looking at nicotine by itself, that's different. You know, it's not as addictive as they say, because at least in my research, what causes a lot of the addictive properties is the actual burnt components of what you're smoking. So like burning tobacco creates pyrazine, and that is addictive, but so is like burnt meat. Like it's carcinogenic, but it can have some kind of addictive components to it because it's not about the actual ingredients, about that chemical that is being produced with burning something.
I'm definitely addicted to meat. So
yeah, me too. It's great. Yeah, if it's not overcooked, which is, again, that's where a lot of the benefits with meat is if it's like medium rare,
right,
or rare. But if you cook it too much, you start losing those benefits. So anyway, with nicotine, that's kind of how it is with nicotine. It's like nicotine by itself can help with cognition. It can help with reducing your risk for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. It's also been shown to be helpful for long COVID, because long COVID with SARS-CoV-2, what it does is it binds to a receptor that nicotine also binds to. And so when that nicotine is in your system, it'll compete for that binding, and it can replace, allegedly, according to some of this research, the SARS-CoV-2 chemical. And so it can start to replace that and help with things like cognition, fatigue, even some pain with those kind of issues. So pretty interesting.
So, I mean, what would someone do if they wanted to like use nicotine? I mean, because obviously you're not going to smoke.
Right.
You just have a nicotine patch, and it's like that's just somehow now this new biohack.
I think it could be. Yeah. I think so. The patches, I think, are probably going to be your best bet, just slapping one on, or the gum. Pouches are another newer thing, like Zens and all that. But the issue with those is they'll add like aspartame to them and food ingredients that are not helpful. But gum also has aspartame in it. So it's kind of like doing a nicotine pouch. If you can get one that's pretty clean, that doesn't have any flavors added to it or food ingredients added to it, it's probably going to be a decent option for you.
Yeah.
But the patches, 2 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 7 milligrams are what have been found to be pretty helpful for these conditions. So I think it could be a biohacking tool.
I didn't even think about pouches, and I've heard of that Zen and stuff like that now. I don't even know if that's like a relatively new thing. I don't know.
I didn't heard about like this year, so I think it is more recent. But yeah.
But it's funny because when I was playing baseball, chewing tobacco was always massive.
Sure.
And, we had pouches and other things, and I never got into it. I mean, I probably had chewed a couple of times in my entire life, of my whole career playing baseball. And every time I did it, it was always a day I was like not playing. And then somebody would be like, dude, just like put one, pack a dip real quick. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So I'm sitting on the bench and dude, like after an inning, I'm like toast.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, this ain't it.
It's too much.
Yeah. And I'm like feeling woozy. Like I want to throw up, all this stuff. But what's interesting is, the people who would do it all the time,
sure,
which obviously is not good, but like I would see these guys play every single game with it. I mean, they do it every single day, at the game, before the game, after the game,
all the time,
friggin' at the gym.
Yeah.
Like people be doing it all the time. And they're like, dude, it helps me focus.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the heck is this helping you focus? Like I'm trying to go hit this 98-mile-an-hour pitch.
Right. I
can't even sit here in this dugout.
Well, that's the problem is it is a stimulant. So just like caffeine, too much of it can be a bad thing. I think a low dose of like 2 milligrams of nicotine, maybe a couple times a day could be a decent option. But a lot of the guys, they'll start getting a tolerance built up, just like with caffeine, to where they need more and more and more. And that's where your heart rate can start to go up and you can have a little more cardiovascular risk with doing that long term. So I think with anything, it's like you can't go crazy with it. You have to use it intentionally and kind of with purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. So, I think if you're doing something like this where you want to be more on point, you could use it before this kind of an event and just use it selectively. But using it all day long, every day, I don't think that's wise.
You guys just see me packing a Zen on every podcast.
Right,
this podcast sponsored by Zen.
Yeah, please don't. I actually don't like Zen, the corporation. No offense, but they did some funding for some people that I don't support. So
got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, obviously, that's one thing that's kind of like this interesting thing,
sure,
that no one's probably even thought about being maybe even potentially beneficial in a way.
Yeah.
What are some other things?
Well, I was going to hit back on the nicotine. It actually increases testosterone too. So for your audience, I think that's helpful to know. So that's another benefit. But yeah, I think for other things, my primary focus, as we were saying before, is hormonal health, specifically for women. But as we were saying before, that is applicable to men's health as well. There's kind of different consequences if you don't have good hormonal health for men versus women. But the pathways are very much similar. And so for men, you have to think about if you have something, so cholesterol is your building block for hormones. You got to have good cholesterol. Cholesterol is obtained through food. But it's one of those things that people start associating cholesterol with being a negative thing. You see it on Cheerios boxes, like low cholesterol, heart healthy. That's a bunch of crap. That's not the focus. The focus is taking your cholesterol and converting it into pregnenolone, progesterone, cortisol, testosterone, and your estrogens. Like that's what you're trying to make from cholesterol. And so if you have that kind of building block to start with, that's good. But if you don't have things like omega-3s, like B5, B6, B vitamins, magnesium, healthy insulin levels, if you're inflamed chronically, if you have a lot of phthalates and plastics in your underwear and all that kind of stuff, polyester, all those things can become hormone disruptors to where now they're starting to take this good thing and convert it into an unfavorable thing for you as a man. It will likely convert to either cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is fine. But if you're relying on that all the time, like using a nicotine pouch, like that will start to stimulate a lot of cortisol long term. So you don't want to start creating long-term cortisol production. Like it can create a lot of issues. But we want to get that balance between cortisol and testosterone so that you're not converting it just into estrogens. Because when males have issues with testosterone, they start making estrogen or DHT, which is where male pattern baldness starts to occur. So you want to make sure you're balanced with your hormones with all that stuff. And
got it.
Yeah. There's a lot. I could keep going, but I don't want to keep rambling on it.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's important for people to know, like, the science behind what actually helps your hormones, but then also too the more applicable thing of like, all right,
what do I do?
Yeah, what does that even mean?
Yeah, and it's the simple things like, you were saying like, so how do you help your clients? It's like with sleep, diet, and nutrition. It's like, yeah, like those are the building blocks of health. Like you can't take a hormone replacement therapy drug long term and expect that it's going to work well for you if that's all you're doing. Like if you're not sleeping, if you're not eating healthy, if you're eating a lot of inflammatory foods, if you're deficient in omega-3s or B vitamins or magnesium, like you're going to start having long-term issues. Like you're going to take that good hormone and it's now going to be converted into estrogen and you're going to start getting man boobs and things like that. So like you don't want that. So you can't just like have a pill for every ill mentality. You have to do the basics. And this is where I think a biblical perspective is so important, because we have to be intentional with our life, right? Like, you're obviously a very intentional guy. Like, you run a very intentional business. Like, it doesn't just happen willy-nilly. Like, it happens for a reason. It's the same thing with our health. Like, we have to understand, like, what are my objectives? Like, what is actually the problem in front of me? And what are the steps I need to take to implement a strategy that I can actually be consistent with?
Yeah.
And most people don't know how to do that. And most people don't even have the conviction or the belief that if they do something, that they'll actually yield a result that will be favorable for them. So if I said, hey, if you eat these foods and take these supplements, it'll cure your diabetes. They're going to be like, well, my doctor said I can't cure my diabetes. I have to take this drug for the rest of my life. Like, okay, like that's a belief that you've held on to that is not true. So we have to break down that belief, show you the alternative pathway to actually fix that problem. And then you have to be consistent enough, long enough to see that come to fruition. Like, but that's a whole process, right? So that's where I think the spiritual aspect of everything that we do is so important, but especially with our health, we have to understand that there's a lot of deception in the medical field that is, in my opinion, intentionally keeping people sick for a profit. And I think once we start to understand that we don't have to always follow the conventional wisdom, and the conventional wisdom, at least the conventional medical model, is great for car accidents and surgery and all that kind of stuff. Like
trauma.
We're the best place in the world for that stuff. But when it comes to preventing disease or even reversing disease, I think we're actually like one of the worst in the world. So we have to kind of understand that that's just a fact. And the alternative option is not as fringe or as quackery as people would lead it on to be.
Well, I don't think it is now. I think
it's not so much now anymore.
Wised up a ton since COVID.
Yeah.
You know, you see Trump has RFK, and so he's talking about a lot of these different things now. So, I mean, before we get into the things that do work, what about the things that are lies? So what are some things, like you said, like there are some propagandas out there that are intentionally out there for profit to keep you sick?
Yeah, I mean, the big one right now is, these ingredients that are in our food. You know, that was even just in the last 6 months, that was a lie that if you said anything about that, there was a bunch of these paid influencers that were saying like, hey, these food dyes and these ultra processed foods, like seed oils, they don't do anything for you. Like, it's all just a bunch of baloney.
When you say paid influencers, are these people in like the biohacking space or?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if I say that, I'm like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, right. No, it's, there's some of them have been proved to be true to where they're paid by big food industry to support things like artificial sweeteners and things like that, just to show that there's no harmful effects. That came out in the actual mainstream media. But yeah, there's other people out there that usually what I've noticed is they're PhDs in nutritional science. And I'm not going to name any names because I'm not sure who you've had on your show, but there's some bigger people out there that they've been really antagonistic to everything that I just said. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't know why they would do that unless they are being told to say what they're saying. Because the research is compelling enough to say we don't really know the full answer here. Like there's enough evidence on their side to say like it could go either way. But I think the big food industry has really pushed hard to get their research to the top of the mainstream media so that all we hear and read about is what they want us to hear about.
Right.
So that's one. I think the other one would be, kind of how, and this is getting back to some maybe gender roles, but I think how women are kind of being subject to a lot more of an attack than males are, through our food, through our beauty products, through our environmental toxins, through our cultural expectations of a woman's role, is another big issue that I've found that nobody really talks about. We put a lot of stress on women to do a lot of different things, and getting back to the hormonal perspective, it doesn't work long term. And I think when you start having men with low testosterone and you have women who are getting a lot more put on their shoulders, the male's initiation to take care of a woman in a leadership role is going to diminish, and the woman's necessity for taking on extra responsibilities is going to increase. And I think that's a big one that's nobody really wants to talk about.
Well, so for me, I think about all these things and, back to, like you said, a biblical perspective, right? I mean, the man is supposed to lead and, be a provider and all these things. And, I've even had the alpha male guys on here.
Sure.
And everyone says the same things.
Right.
Which is funny.
It is funny.
But yet, we're in the position we're in where, like you said, women are taking on bigger roles and everything else. And I just have thought about it from like a socio, I don't even know what you would call it, but like a society standpoint.
Sure.
Of just kind of how things are and inflation and other stuff. And it's like, oh, well, women just at this point
got to work.
They got to work 2 incomes with the cost of living and other things. Which is a reason for men to just step up.
Right.
That's my reasoning is like, I get it. It costs more to live. Freaking go make more money, dude. Like, let's
learn more
it out.
skills and all the things that you talk about. And I think for me and my wife, because we had to face that challenge when we first got married, very similar to your story. We didn't have any money. And, but I had a dream before I met my wife of, I was working on our property. And I came out of my office and I saw our kids and I saw my wife, and I didn't have a face at that time because it was a dream before I met her. But my wife homeschooling our kids and taking care of our kids and just staying at home with our kids. Like that was a vision, I guess you could call, before I met her. And when I met her, I asked her, I was like, what do you envision your life to be like as a wife, as a woman? And she said, like, well, I'd love to stay at home with my kids and I love to educate my kids. And she's a teacher by trade. She got her bachelor's in elementary ed and all that. So she's qualified, but even still, like she wanted to be a teacher and educate our children. And so we had that conversation and we ended up getting married and all that. But we decided early on that we're going to start to create a family structure that would allow for our kids to be just like more under our protection, like more under our influence and all that. And you can call it sheltering, call it whatever you want, but it was just a goal that we had. And so that happened early on, but she worked like crazy. She worked for a musician. She nannied for them. I worked making furniture on the side when I was in school. Like we did everything we could just to kind of get through. But then as soon as I got a job, she went immediately being in the home. We had our first kid.
Yeah.
And it was rough. Like it was financially rough, but we sacrificed in other areas because we weren't going to sacrifice in what we determined was important.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of where I think God blessed that over time, but it took time. You know, it didn't happen overnight.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah. But I had to learn a lot of skills to be able to afford that too.
Yeah. Because it was important to you. It was a priority.
It mattered. Right.
What's funny is I was just thinking about, you guys, some would call it sheltering, but you wanted to have your influence over the kids and everything else. And it's so funny because, the world would say, oh, well, that's a negative thing. They're going to be sheltered and go crazy, or they're going to be weird and all these things. And I'm like, well, the alternative is somebody else has all the influence over your kids who, and by the way, if you're a successful person, would I want to influence my kids?
Right.
Or let somebody else who's, whatever their life is, whatever they got going on, they might not be saved. They're obviously they don't make a lot of money. I mean, they're teachers,
right?
So they don't really know financial things.
Sure.
Whatever agenda the school's got, and then also too all of their classmates, and so that all of those kids, whatever they got going on back home with their families and everything else, you just like look at it all, and it's like, well, they're going to be influenced one way or the other.
Sure.
So who are we going to pick?
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
yeah, it's
people pay me to influence them. Why wouldn't I influence my own kid?
Yeah, and that's your first ministry, right? Like our first ministry is our family.
Yeah.
And like you were talking about at the Kingdom Nights, it was like, we have God, our spouse, our kids, and then our ministry. It's like it all happened. Like there's so much work to be done in those first few, like our wives and our spouse or our children, that like that's the highest responsibility I have.
Yeah.
And so having a school environment where kids are identifying as cats and saying that my kids are going to be weird, I'm like, I don't know if I buy that at all. But regardless of that, I think the big stat that really influenced me is that I think it's like 70% of kids that grow up in the church are apostate. Like they leave the church, like they don't hold to the faith. And I'm like, dude, like that's most of them. So like we're not making disciples of our kids.
But I also think a lot of that is being influenced by the world.
Sure.
Right? So it's like, what makes you become because most kids are not homeschooled or anything, right? Like most Christian kids.
It's not a requirement, yeah.
I grew up in a normal public school,
Sure.
just like everyone else. So it's like you're exposed to the same things that everyone else is exposed to.
Yeah, and I think it's preparing your kids for that exposure, right? Like having them have the contrast, like, hey, this is what mom and dad said, this is what they raised me to be like, and this is what the world's telling me to do and say. Like having that contrast gives perspective to where you can then make wise decisions. Like that's all we can ask for. But like we can't, the goal is not to keep them locked up. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like we want to prepare them for the world so they can go out and be effective in the world.
Yeah, 100%. And I myself am also not sheltered, right? Because I'm out here in the world talking to everybody and anybody and doing things. And so, that's one thing also too that I tell Christians, like, how do you live in Vegas? And I'm like, because I want to bring the gospel to the people that need it.
Absolutely.
You know, I want to be not of the world, but I'm in the world.
Sure.
Right. Whereas if I go live in the Bible Belt and everybody, thinks they're all good, it's like, dude, no, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, it's cool.
But you got to be stronger to be able to deal with that because there are some people who they ain't equipped for that.
But I think because I've lived in the Bible Belt and I technically still do, but the thing I've noticed, like you said, is like they think they're good. They think they're good, and that's actually worse because I think it creates complacency within me too.
Yeah,
to where I'm like, oh yeah, we're all good.
Yeah,
and then yet we're all being passive. Exactly. But you come out here and like, I read my Bible more since I've been out here than I have probably for the last year, just because like I feel like I need to. I got to be like armed and ready, you know. And so I think you got something good going on here for sure.
So back to the health part of it. So you had mentioned women end up having more issues hormonally with these changes that are happening with maybe society is causing them.
Sure.
Like is their hormonal, whatever messed up compared to men, like at a higher rate? Like what's happening?
Yeah. So about 80% of women have hormonal imbalances. Men, it's probably under 35%.
Really?
Yeah. So it's pretty drastic. Women also have, of all the autoimmune issues, men and women, 75% of them are women. So that's huge. Women also have about 40% more perceived stress than men. And I think you and I were talking about this, like, this is somebody else I was talking to. Just like, if I go down like a dark alley and I see somebody, my first thought is like, okay, how big is he? Like, does he have a gun? Maybe could he take me on? But like, if you're a woman, like you go down a dark alley, like everybody you see could be a potential threat.
Yeah.
And so like that immediately puts women in a different category of like, they need different protection. Like they need different things than we do more times than not. So I think there's that right off the bat. I think that is a physiological, has been there since the beginning of time issue. But the issue we're seeing now is birth control is a big problem. Yeah. That was really heavily implemented in the 1970s. Going back even further, I think her name was Margaret, I can't remember her name, Satcher or something like that. She was a big proponent for Planned Parenthood. Huge racist, bigot, like discriminated against people of color. She thought that, Planned Parenthood would be helpful to kind of create more of like a pure society. And so they wanted to kind of start that whole agenda that was very linked to like eugenics and Nazism and all that stuff. And birth control kind of stemmed from that. And the feminist movement kind of stemmed from all of that, to where in the 70s, it was like women should be out in the workforce. They should be out of the home. They should be empowered. They should be doing all these things. And we need birth control so that they don't need to get pregnant so they can go out and do all those things. And so birth control, I think, has been one of the bigger issues that women have been kind of lied to about, to where they take it, it takes away their ovulation cycle, it lowers their progesterone, it creates more issues with estrogen dominance, which is not good. So a lot of fertility issues, and it also creates deficiencies and depression, anxiety, and all these issues. And so that's really, I think, historically was one of the bigger issues that women were under attack with. That's kind of continued on through to today.
I never even thought about all the hormonal, but clearly you're altering a lot.
Big time. Yeah, you take away ovulation. So a women's hormones, it's kind of like a bell curve. Like the beginning of the month, begin their cycle, things are, energy wise, intensity wise, everything should be pretty low. And then as the cycle starts to rise, you get to ovulation, it kind of peaks and then it kind of falls off again. So it's kind of like a bell curve. If you're eliminating that for a woman, you're not going through that natural rhythm that a woman's supposed to go through. And so you start getting a lot of consequences hormonally with that. And if you're trying to get pregnant, you should probably wait at least a year after you get off birth control to try to conceive, because your hormones just aren't going to be right. But a lot of women are taking birth control, they cut it off, they wait 6 weeks, and they try getting pregnant. They don't get pregnant. They get all stressed out. The husband and wife are all stressed out. They start looking at fertilization, IVF, and really the issue is their hormones are so whacked up from the birth control that they have to fix that first.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what are things that women do to fix their hormonal issues? Because I feel like with men, like the default answer right now has just been TRT.
Yeah, TRT all day, which I can talk about that. It's the same conversation with hormone replacement therapy with women. It's like if you, like I said before, if you haven't fixed anything and you just start taking TRT, you will see initial improvements for sure.
Yeah. Long
term, a couple years, your cardiovascular risk factors go up because testosterone creates red blood cells. Like that's one of the main delivery mechanisms for improved muscle building is you deliver more oxygen faster. And so that's good. But if you make a lot of red blood cells, you can start getting a little bit more prone to coagulation, to where your blood cells become a little bit thick. And now you can start having more heart risk factors and things like that, cardiovascular risk factors. So you got to make sure that you get that under control from from a functional medicine perspective. You want to make sure that you're getting your lifestyle factors under control first before you ever do any kind of hormone replacement therapy, at least in my opinion.
Right. I've heard a lot of people, like women, are now taking testosterone.
Yeah. It's
like how does that work? Like, I mean, obviously women don't need as much as men.
No, it's a fraction. I mean, women's testosterone can be around like 50. A man's can be, 750, 1200, can be anywhere in that range. So it's a very small fraction, but yeah, testosterone is super helpful for fat metabolism. So when women start getting imbalanced and they start creating more estrogen, they don't create testosterone, they start storing more fat and they start having more issues with, they pack on more pounds. It's not healthy body weight.
Okay. Got it. What are some other things that, back to the pharmaceutical thing, like what are some other lies that maybe aren't necessarily true?
Oh gosh.
You've gotten a lot of, on Instagram, you've gotten like, I don't want to say banned a few times, but like.
I've been censored a few times. Yeah. Had a post removed the other day, just straight up.
What are you saying?
I was talking about cancer.
Okay. What were you saying?
Just wait. So, so in the United States, if you don't recommend like surgery or radiation or chemo, like you can go to jail as a provider. It's a serious thing. So me even commenting on the C word is like a risky deal, because I can become, it's worse than COVID. It's worse than most things. I was just saying, like, if I had cancer, this is what I would do.
Okay, what would you do?
So much of what I do already, it's an anti-inflammatory diet, which for me, it's, nightshades, gluten, dairy, some legumes, healthy foods that people consider to be healthy are foods that I have found to be somewhat inflammatory, to where it can create ongoing issues if you're not careful. So that's a whole gut health conversation that we could talk about, but.
So those things you just said, are those good or bad?
Those would be more on the not so favorable side for most people.
So legumes, beans.
Yes.
Dairy.
Dairy, grains. Nightshades. And then eggs can be an issue for.
What are nightshades? I thought
like you meant tomatoes, potatoes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant like covering when I go to sleep.
Like a nightshade. Yeah. No, it's like, it's a category of vegetable.
Okay. So tomatoes, potatoes.
Yeah, they're pretty inflammatory.
You said eggs are inflammatory?
So eggs, I did a post on this recently. The issue with eggs is that, so a lot of flu vaccines and other vaccines will use egg-based ingredients to make the vaccine.
Okay.
When you put that into a vaccine, and your body's starting to then identify like, okay, we got to create an antibody to whatever this is whatever has been injected into me. So that's like how a vaccine will work. You start to create an antibody response to that thing. So a flu vaccine, you have all the ingredients with that, but part of those ingredients are eggs.
Yeah.
And so there's ovalbumin, which is a protein in eggs that can start to become like an allergy or sensitivity for people if you've had vaccines, or even not even if you've had vaccines, but it can happen in general. So a lot of people have underlying autoimmune issues that they're not aware of that aren't showing up on lab markers, because if you can't find it in your blood, then they don't say it exists, but it doesn't mean it's not a problem. So eggs can contribute to that immune response for some people. So in my process, we have them take out eggs and nightshades and all these different types of foods to find out diagnostically what foods they're sensitive to. And once we do that and they start seeing weight loss and joint pain goes away, energy goes up, we then create a baseline to where we know, like, hey, they're functioning at a high level. We should be able to add foods in back selectively and see kind of how they respond. So like that food is a big part of it. But I'm trying to think what your initial question was.
So cancer, you were saying you would eliminate those foods.
Cut those things out. Parasites are another issue you got to be mindful of with that. And again, a lot of this, if you look in the research, they're going to say what I'm saying is not well founded. But if you look at how parasites respond to pathogens like bacteria and viruses, parasites can turn off a part of your white blood cells that would deal with pathogens. And so if you have chronic parasites, which a lot of people in the United States do, again, even that statement is going to be challenged.
I can actually talk about that.
Really?
So I've had Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on the show.
Yeah.
And so she's helped me out a lot. And first thing she tested me for was parasites.
Yeah.
And I had them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. Because she was basically like, if you travel a lot of out of country,
right,
like it's very common.
Right.
So, and I travel a lot. And so I did it was literally like 10 days of just antibiotics or whatever. I don't even really know what it was.
Probably not antibiotics, but yeah. It depends. It depends on how bad it was, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't even remember what it was. But literally I didn't even realize how much the parasites were affecting me. For even being in good shape and all the stuff that I'm in, I didn't realize like it was affecting my sleep, my energy levels, how I woke up feeling. After that, just for 10 days doing the treatment, I felt night and day difference.
Right.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm actually right now, this very moment, in another cycle of doing it again.
Yeah.
Because that was like a year ago. And then obviously like I've traveled and done stuff again.
It's good to do it.
And now I'm doing it again. And so like I'm not fully through it, but I'm halfway through and I can already start to like see a difference.
Yeah, they affect a lot of things. They bind heavy metals. They're really helpful at kind of cleaning up some things in our system. But if they get out of control, they can be really negative. And so a lot of the cancer cell replication can be kind of promoted if you have excessive parasites. And so having things like ivermectin is an antiparasitic. That was really big during COVID. It was called the horse dewormer and all that stuff, and got a bad rap. But if you look at why it was effective, and the research is now finally showing that it is effective, is that it goes after parasites, and it goes after that immune system issue that I was referring to before. It's Th1 cells. So there's Th1 and Th2 cells in your immune system. Th1 go after pathogens, bacteria and viruses. And so if you eliminate the parasites to where they can't dictate how your white blood cells could potentially respond, you'll allow your immune system's natural ability to fight pathogens. And so I think the same is true for cancer too, but I gotta be careful saying that because
I don't care. You're not going to get.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've had very controversial guests and things on. I mean, I remember when I first got on YouTube, they're like, you can't talk about COVID.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. I've been doing this whole time.
I'm like, I ain't getting a shot.
Yeah. Right. It's one of those things that I think there's hierarchies to this whole thing. Now that everyone knows about COVID, it's no longer you can talk about as much as you want.
Yeah.
But like as we kind of peel the layers back, I think they're going to be holding on.
So your belief is that there's like a ton of misinformation about cancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your solution would be fix your diet, get rid of parasites.
Yeah. You got to do the basics. You got to get all that basic stuff figured out. Now, interestingly enough, at that biohacking conference I was just at, I met a couple people. One is John Richardson. He's pretty well known in the alternative world. He's really big on apricot seeds and B17 and how it can cure cancer or help to treat cancer.
How, do you grind up an apricot seed? You can't.
I don't know what
eat
he does.
Yeah.
I don't know how he does it. He has a formula. His dad was a doctor, and he did it back in the 80s and 70s, and he got his license removed and all this stuff back then.
That's crazy.
And but yeah, you should check. I met him though and talked to him for a couple hours, and he was telling me all this stuff, and he's a fascinating Christian guy. And then another one I met was I forget how to say her name. It's like Liana Warner Gray. I'm sorry if I'm messing up your name. I just met her, but she wrote a book on she cured her own cancer.
Wow.
15 years ago through her diet and chloroform and sulforaphane. So that's kind of what they've done, and they have protocols and they have all this stuff. I'm just now dipping my toe into it because it's been one of those topics I'm like, I got to be careful, and I need to do my research, and I haven't done enough research. My brother had cancer when he was 14, and that's actually what got me into the medical field. Seeing him go through all that chemo and radiation and all that, it was terrible. But yeah, I'm not sure. Cancer is one of those things. I would never call myself an expert on it, but I'm just dipping my toe into it.
Right. I think most people would agree. Like, nobody likes chemo.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like chemo's the last resort if it's like at a certain stage.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. A lot of the problems, like even with breast cancer, there's a lot of research showing that the mammograms themselves are potentially more harmful than they are helpful, because when you start doing all that radiation every few years, right on that tissue, it can definitely expose the tissue to more cancerous cells. And then you start doing biopsies, and when you go into a tumor or whatever, suspected tumor, and you start pulling things out, a tumor is designed to kind of encapsulate the problem. When you start to open it up, I think that's when cancer can spread potentially more. So again, those are all statements that people could be really upset by, but I think the research is starting to show that we got to be more cautious with those kind of screenings. What
are some things that, because right now you're talking about things that are going to be debated now the next like decade plus, right? Like more and more research will be coming out like, yeah, dude, actually this was right. It was an idea 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but now it's been proven to be true. What are some things now today that were kind of like that 10 years ago, 15 years ago that are now like everybody agrees?
Oh yeah. I mean, the gut microbiome was one of the big ones that was probably talked about 30 years ago that now people are, even conventionally, they're starting to educate on. Just the role of your gut with everything. Before that was like just a load of crap. So that was a big one. I think just the role, even with these food dyes, with these artificial ingredients, with phthalates and fluoride in your water, like those are all things that used to be kind of dismissed immediately, and they're now starting to become more mainstream.
Fluoride, yeah. I see RFK's talking a lot about that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, if you mentioned it, you're just like a big quack, It's like fluoride's good for your teeth. It's like, well, it's actually a chemical waste product that lowers your IQ, and messes with your
like
thyroid.
Why would fluoride be in water still?
Well, I think because the farmers were the ones that were using it in something, and it was getting into the soil, and then it just kind of became a part of our waste management issue, and they just kind of said like, this is better just to like find a positive spin on it than actually get rid of it. So I think that's what they've done, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of?
Gosh. There's so many, like everything that I'm talking about with like holistic health, even in the last 2 years, was considered to be kind of malarkey. It's so many things. Like the fact that food has a role in your healing is like a newer conventional topic.
You're like, why would this be?
Like, why are we just now talking? Like, why have doctors not been educated on nutrition until they're still not? But like, I'm hoping that starting now they will be. This guy I was just talking to, he was saying that somebody he knows, they're going to start a medical school that maybe, I'm hoping I'm not saying anything, but that's 80% nutrition and 20% pharmacy.
Wow.
Whereas right now it's not even the other way around. It's like,
well, I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one is preventative, one is reaction. And it's like, I think obviously if you eat right and you do those things that you're supposed to do, then you're just by default not going to end up in a lot of the situations that people do. And then the question becomes, if you haven't been doing it right and now you have this problem, will all of a sudden doing it right fix it, or do you now need to go to the extreme measures of pharmacy?
So I've had a lot of clients that are that prime example, where they had diabetes, they had these heart disease, they've had rheumatoid arthritis, they've had hypothyroidism, all these conditions that people say you can't fix. You need medication, and we've helped them fix it in like 6 months.
Yeah.
So I know it's true. And they've been like worst case, like they call me because they don't have any other option. Like you're the guy online that I'm following. I've talked to all my local doctors, specialists.
They all just want to give me drugs.
Now I'm going to reach out to you because I don't know what else to do. And we're like, all right, let's get to work. So it happens fast. Like God created our bodies to heal, right? Like every cell is in obedience to its creator. So like, I think as soon as we have that perspective that God created us in a certain order, it's no longer a question of is it possible? It's just like, well, how long is it going to take? Now, doesn't mean we're going to live forever because our bodies are decaying slowly, but
due to sin.
Yeah, due to sin. But I think people's day-to-day experience of relying on a drug, Zach Bush, I'm not sure if you ever talked to Zach Bush. If not, he's a cool MD. He let his license expire because he doesn't want to prescribe drugs anymore. She's like, there's no point in taking drugs. Like there's like, even most worst case scenarios, like there's no point in taking a drug. So he just doesn't prescribe at all anymore. So I think there are some drugs, and my old business partner, really good friend, Zach Wright, you should look him up. You should have him on the show. He's ex-Green Beret, medical doctor, functional. He and I started my practice. He'll say that like some drugs are okay. But most doctors, I think if we go down this road properly with RFK, I think there's going to be about $2 trillion of funding that's going towards health. That's no longer going to be going towards the things that we're spending money on now with the reactive measures. I think if we put it towards the preventative, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be healed and made well through very simple, natural remedies that don't require pharmacy.
Yeah.
But the problem is that's a huge amount of money. So that's where I'm like,
is it going to actually happen?
Is it actually going to happen? Because that's a big undertaking. But I think if we rewarded people for making people healthy and paid them for it, it would help to solve some of that problem. It's like that money's not going away. So like, let's just reward people for doing the right thing.
Yeah, let's distribute it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of RFK, like what do you think are some of the things that he's doing? What have you heard or read?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's obviously our best shot at getting this moving in the right direction. I think even just having a willingness to listen to other experts in the field and kind of collaborate with them is what he's done really well over the last couple years, to where he's listening to other people's ideas. But he was also an environmental lawyer or whatever it's called. I think that was his title back in California. So he's seen the more of the fluoride stuff, and he knows a lot about that. He's looked a lot into the vaccines. So I think he'll do a lot for getting the ball rolling, and I think it's up to the people to kind of keep pushing it forward after that. But I think I was very shocked that that all worked out. Honestly.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would.
Trump's just like, we're just bringing everyone.
Yeah, the whole team, the A team, dude. It's like the Avengers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be cool to see what Elon and Vivek and RFK and all these people.
Yeah, Kash Patel with the FBI. I think that'd be really good. Do you know about him?
No.
Yeah,
I've heard of him, but I don't know what he does.
Yeah, I don't know what his role was with Trump before. I think he was in the other administration, but he was already on like Glenn Beck or something like that, talking about what they're going to release in regards to like the World Trade Center and, the JFK assassination and all this stuff. And
yeah,
I think if he's able to actually do what he says he's going to do, it could be wild as far as what will be coming out.
Oh, he wants to release just everything.
Not everything, but what they can. Yeah. He was saying too, it's like, we wouldn't be able to handle everything.
Yeah.
We'd freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I think RFK's the right man for the job for now. And I think, we just need someone who's bold and courageous to just say like, we need this to stop. Like for the future generations, like we gotta make this stop.
How do you let your Christian beliefs kind of like dictate all these things you research and test and promote and everything else? Like, Do you run it through that filter, or is it naturally just making you pursue different things? Like,
that's a good question. I don't know. I've definitely been wrong in the past on stuff, like we all have. But I think I always try to start with I have one prayer. It's like, God, show me my idols, like expose them to me so I know like what's wrong and what's right. And then I ask for wisdom because God says He'll give it to us abundantly. And so I rely on those two truths to kind of like set the filter as much as I can. And then you'll read a lot of stuff where it's like, is this for somebody else's gain? Is this legitimate? And it's just hard. I think I've always been I've always questioned everything, and so I think that's been kind of my natural propensity is just I see something, I question it. I don't take it at face value. I dive as deep as I can on it. And I think that's just carried over into healthcare. It was that way with when I was a kid. 9/11 happened, and I was just like, this seems weird. I'm going to look into this. And it's that way with all these different conspiracies. I entertain all the conspiracies just to see what people are talking about because I'm just curious. I just want to see what they're referencing.
What do you think about peptides?
Yeah, I think it's like anything else. It's helpful. It's kind of a cheat code to kind of rebuild, recover, and grow faster. I think it's a good tool. It's one of those things like
I've tried a bunch of them.
Yeah. What do you like the most?
Well, right now I'm not currently on any of them, but over the last year and a half, I've like experimented with a ton.
Did you see positive results?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like you said, it's like a cheat code.
Yeah. Yeah, it's.
I was like, this is crazy, and then I see the government trying to ban them now, and I'm just like, dude,
yeah,
like,
why don't you want us to be healthy?
Like, I don't get it.
You don't like us. Why do you not like us?
Like, why is this thing good that's not good, and then all of a sudden you don't want this thing that seemingly doesn't really have many negative side effects?
Yeah, well, it gets back to what I think is a greater agenda. It's like they think there's too many people in the world.
Who thinks that?
World Economic Forum and the WHO, like they've said that their depopulation agenda is a good one for the future of our globe, because I think they prioritize the health of the environment more than the health of the people. And I think it's an anti-God idea. Yeah.
The earth is more important than the people who have dominion over it.
Right. But when you look at it through that lens, everything else makes much more things make sense of like why they wouldn't want us to have good information, why they wouldn't want us taking peptides or having access to good food or clean water, clean air. It's like, which is so ironic to me because it's like you have China who makes more emissions than anyone else in the world combined, I think, and they don't put any regulations on them because they manufacture everything for the rest of the world. But if they actually cared about the world, there would be regulations for everybody in every country.
Right.
So it's just a weird, twisted, anti-God mentality.
The WHO and who's the other one?
WHO and the World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab.
And they're not they're kind of like the United Nations. They're not managed by any.
They're all collective. Yeah, they kind of all the big countries in the world run that deal.
And they want depopulation?
They think depopulation is a good idea. They think it would be best for our society going forward if we can have less people because we're growing too quickly.
Why does a guy like Elon think we need more kids?
Elon's so interesting to me. I don't trust Elon. I'll just say that if you're watching Elon, then no offense, but the Neuralink deal, I don't think that's wise. But I think Elon is interesting because he is so counter the World Economic Forum and all these people that I just mentioned, where he wants more kids and he wants people to be healthier and he wants government to be less in our back pockets and he wants more freedom. And so it's like that to me is really appealing. But then like you got Neuralink and all this other stuff. I'm just like, I don't know where you're going or what your agenda is, but I think in general, he's with Trump for a reason. I think he's maybe woken up to some of these truths that we're all realizing about what's going on with these world powers. And maybe he's just trying to fight that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, he has like 12 kids, so.
I know. Well, but like I've heard him make arguments for why we all need to populate.
We need more people. Well, we're losing population. That's again, so like as a whole, we're not going to be able to replace our current population if we go on our current trajectory. So
people stop having kids.
Yeah, they stop having kids or they can't have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people are way more infertile than before.
Right. So their agenda has already taken effect. It's just they've been outspoken about it more recently than they have in the past.
I'm just thinking, like, from an objective standpoint, okay, you have less people. I mean, I guess, okay, there's less of
Quality
a
over quantity thing.
on the earth. Like, I get that. On the other hand, okay, let's say you have more people. I mean, yeah, there's more of a footprint, but the earth is so massive.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, you go from Oklahoma to Colorado, you could put like 1 billion people right there. Like,
Yeah,
there's
like,
so
I'm
much-
not like, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Like we have space, you know, we have ability. I think I don't know. I don't understand it. It's just an anti-God. That's something. That's the only way I can sum it up. It's just anti-God.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's no other explanation for it. It's just twisted.
Yeah. What
But
else?
yeah.
What else is there that we don't know about?
Man, you got to be careful with me because like my friends like they think I'm a conspiracy theorist by definition, like critical thinker kind of thing. But there's a lot of conspiracies out there about what's happening right now that I think you could go down rabbit holes pretty quick, and it may not be fruitful to spend time on it. But I think in terms of what we're talking about, I think the awakening happened at the right time where people woke up to what was going on. I think a lot of what happened with Trump was by design, to where if he was still in office currently, I don't think we'd be talking about this stuff right now. I think there was enough
Time
and just perspective and awareness for people to be like, oh my gosh, like how did I not know this? And why was I lied to so bad? To where it makes sense that people will see Trump now as like, he's the person of the year. Whereas before 4 years ago, he was the most hated person in the world. You know? So there was a rise of the Phoenix kind of thing that happened with him. And I think that was somewhat by design to get the people's awareness and support behind him so he can go out and do things and people will be like cheering him on for it. Because like if you go after big pharma and big food and you don't have the support of the people, you have nothing.
Yeah.
But if you have the support and people's awareness and moms all around the country who are like, I don't want my kids poisoned anymore, things will happen.
Yeah. So let's talk about the three things you mentioned before of like, okay, all that being said, I think everyone assumes we've been lied to on lots of things. Like nobody really disputes that. We all know food, exercise, and sleep are good, but practically, what does that look like? Because you just mentioned a bunch of inflammatory foods. Like, so what is a good diet?
So we have an anti-inflammatory diet. It's like an autoimmune based protocol. That's where I start my clients. I think if you're not dealing with, fatigue and joint pain, and you're just like, I just want to optimize my health, it would probably be more of like, if you're going to drink milk, make sure it's more on the raw side of life. If you're going to be eating food, make sure it's organic, make sure all that basic stuff. If you're going to be eating grains like rice, make sure you soak it overnight so you can reduce the anti-nutrient components like phytic acid and all that kind of stuff, lectins. But really, I think the first step for people, if you're watching this, is just to like, you and whoever's in your household need to sit down and say, hey, like, what are we trying to accomplish with the food in our house? Like, go through your pantry. If it's shelf stable for more than a few days, being on a shelf without being in a refrigerator, it's probably very processed.
Yeah.
If it's need to be in a refrigerator, if it's normal food, if it's single letter ingredient kind of stuff, like think about those kind of things first. And if you have kids, like don't feed them the nuggets and, the mac and cheese at the restaurants and at your house, like feed them real food. Like I'm just always amazed when you go to a restaurant, like the kids menu is just full of garbage. It's like, kids don't need to be eating this stuff. Like, why can't they eat regular food with us? And so just start feeding them real food. And then if you don't have a routine with like sleep, especially with yourselves, like if you're staying up watching Netflix before bed and just all that kind of stuff that everyone does on their phones, doom scrolling, going to bed too late, you're messing with your circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm will start to dictate your energy the next day, starts to dictate how you utilize your insulin. And so you can start to have more issues with diabetes, insulin sensitivity issues if you're eating outside these circadian rhythm windows. And so I always say eat about 80% of your calories before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when your insulin's going to be most sensitive to take that energy and use it well. If you're eating later into the day, you're going to be dealing with more problems in terms of fat storage and energy and sleep issues and inflammation. So those are some very practical things that people can do. But you got to be intentional. You got to sit down and say, hey, honey, we're not going to stay up late and watch these shows anymore. Like, we're going to go to bed at a certain time. Like, just set an alarm for bedtime. Let's feed our kids this menu. Let's be intentional about preparing our food beforehand, so we're not responding in ways that are based on convenience rather than what's best for our family. I think most people rely on convenience because they're just not planning ahead. They just don't have a plan in place. But if they had a plan, they prepped it, they'd probably eliminate most of their problems to start. It just kind of depends on what issue you're dealing with, but those are just like the basic ones.
Real estate investors, I found a brand new way to create cash flow that's better than anything else I've ever done. It's better than rental properties, Airbnb, my flipping business, multifamily. It's the best thing we've done yet. It is building an automated wholesale business. Now you might be saying, Ryan, how do you build an automated wholesale business? Well, what if you had the same exact leads that I get every single month? What if you had a sales script that was so easy to close deals over the phone that you could do it all across the country? And what if you could sell your deals directly on the MLS without a real estate license and without having to actually own the property and getting top dollar? Well, we do that with this new method. And I made an 11-minute video where I go over how it all works, how you can start doing it today. So if you want to go see that video, go to wealthyinvestor.com, go click the case study and see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so when it comes to foods, you mentioned just nothing that has a long shelf life, essentially.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just thinking about my pantry. I have so many things in there. I mean, I have cereals, I have chips, I have fig bars, I have, obviously known things that are not good, like fruit roll-ups and all that. So what do those get replaced with?
I mean, yeah, so
like just fruit and vegetables, like
like food, like the stuff God gave us. Yeah. I mean, I think like my kid, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, my kids don't know what a fruit roll-up is.
Come on, man.
They don't. I know. It's like I grew up with them. You know? But I had so many issues. Like that's a whole nother story. Like I had so many issues that I was dealing with. Like I was super fit when I was in my 20s, but very unhealthy. Now I'm like very healthy, but very unfit. Like I don't work out, so it's like, I'm okay with that because I feel good. But for so long, I grew up, I would take ibuprofen all the time because I had back pain, and then I got stomach ulcers, and I had chronic fatigue, and then I had chronic pain, and then I was like a college athlete trying to get through, and just like felt terrible, couldn't recover, all that stuff. And it wasn't until my wife started feeding me real food, and I got married, and she's like, "Hey, this is a meal. This isn't like a can of Hormel chili. Like this is real food." That I started to see like, oh, like I feel good.
There's a difference.
There's a difference here. But yeah, so I think you got to kind of draw that line. So like our kids will have ice cream occasionally, like they'll have sweets occasionally, but we're very selective. It's like it's a treat, right? It's not a part of their daily life. But there's a lot of companies out there. Again, I think they're finding out that people will reward them if they make it. So they're making more of these foods that don't have seed oils and all these processed sugars and artificial ingredients in them. These bioengineered foods is what they're called. They're not real. They're just bioengineered.
Yeah.
If you replace that stuff first, like there's more alternatives now out there that are becoming better, that aren't going to wreck your health, but they may not optimize it either.
Why are you not working out?
Well, I have a farm, so like I'll chop wood and that kind of stuff, and I start golfing, so that kind of got in my way of working out. Like I work out, I'll do push-ups and stuff like that, but my whole thing is like, this is like I have like a light switch on-off mentality, which I always tell my clients not to do. But it's like, I'm going to do something, I'm going to flip the light switch on. And if I'm not going to do it, I'm going to flip it off. But like, unfortunately, health doesn't work that way. So like, I'm active in a lot of different ways. But as far as like lifting heavy weights and doing all that stuff that I used to do, I found that like, if I can run and play with my kids and lift them over my head and get on the ground and play with them and golf and do whatever I'm required to do on my farm, I'm good with it. But if I start noticing I can't do something, can't lift something, can't squat or whatever, it's like I'll start strength training that area. But I just not like it from an aesthetic perspective. It hasn't been as much of a goal as it used to be when I was in my 20s.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you optimize for just what you actually do.
Yeah.
For me, I optimize for hitting bombs.
That's apparent. if you can control it left or right.
That's true.
Yeah, for everybody though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's more technique.
Yeah, that is technique. But dude, so here's the thing about hitting bombs. So I had a 348 drive at Bear Creek the other day. Like it really didn't roll out. It was just a straight up bomb. Yeah. And I'm like, I got long arms. Like I got a good lever.
Yeah. Tall.
I'm tall. Like I got pretty good upper body strength. But I'm like, dude, that's legit.
Yeah.
And that feels good. But if I go play basketball with the boys, I would get trashed right now. Because like that's a real sport.
Yeah.
No, I mean I love golf, but like that requires athletic ability.
Athleticism.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Golf is like you can learn the skill. And be mobile. You got to be mobile. You got to have
flexible.
certain strength. Yeah. You got to have some level, but it's not like elite level athleticism.
No, you're not running. You're not throwing hard.
Yeah. Look at Scotty Scheffler. He's tall, but he's like got a dad bod and, but he's like the best golfer in the world.
Yeah. I tell the golfers that all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, like,
it's different.
let's get real.
Yeah.
Like you are not the best athletes in the world.
Right.
We're talking about athletic ability.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I had a 42-inch vertical in college. Like I was a good athlete.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I can still dunk barely, but like, it's just because my son is starting to show me up and he's 7 going on 8 and he's starting to wrestle me and beat me up. So like, he's becoming my motivation to like start getting back in the gym because I know I showed him the movie Rocky.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.
He's just punching out people.
Yeah. I found him one morning. He was running laps around our 11 acres
in his hoodie.
Yeah.
Just like,
no, this is the funny thing. And I saw him running laps and then he finds a tree. He gets on a tree branch and starts doing pull-ups. He's 7 years old. He'd like cranked out 6 pull-ups. I was like, dude, I got to step up, man. Like my son's going to kick my butt.
Dude, you should create, you ever seen like one of those gyms like in the jungle made out of like tree trunks and stuff?
I know what you're talking about. I should create one of those.
You did?
No, I should. You're saying?
You should.
Yeah, well.
That would be tight.
You should help me do it.
Yeah, your son's just
doing
make
bench
for good
press. Content. Yeah.
He's got like, the 45s.
Yeah.
Right. In just tree trunks.
Tree trunk. Yeah.
That'd be sick.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah, he's pretty cool. So I'm starting to get back into the gym now because I got to do it for my son's sake so he doesn't beat me up.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about your practice and everything else?
They can Google my name, Dr. Austin Lake, or they can Google my program. It's called the Reclaim Program. But you can also find me on Instagram, dr.austin.lake.
Yeah. And the main people you help is women? Yeah.
So if I have a woman come through the program and her husband needs help, I'll tag team him. But my niche is definitely women's health, trying to help families overall. But
yeah. I think even for me, right, I'm always thinking about, man, how can I get my wife healthier? And all these things because, she's not as like gung-ho about it as I am.
Sure.
She's busy just always having kids and.
Yeah, it's rough. And she wants to you guys want to maybe pursue another one. So yeah, I think setting her up for success in little ways, like I'm sure you already do that, but a lot of guys, I think, for me, like hiring a cleaner to clean the house once a week is a big lift off her shoulders. She loves to cook, but yeah, just having the conversation with her, like, hey, honey, like, how can I support you in leading the health of this family?
Yeah.
The wife always takes that on, but like, it's a tag team effort. And I think having those conversations more and just be like, how can we clean up the pantry? How can we clean up the house? How can we make decisions for our kids? It's super necessary as a husband to do that. And it's hard because I think we kind of just write it off as like, that's not my responsibility, but I think it is for us to do that. And I think if we take on that responsibility, we'll start to research and understand kind of what we need to do and how to support her. But it doesn't mean you have to be an expert in her hormones, but even understanding what her cycle looks like and how she's going to be a little bit lower energy at the beginning and the end of her cycle and more high energy in the middle, like knowing that, you can start to think like, well, how could if I want to be like intimate with my wife, knowing where she is, like she's gonna be really intimate between like days 7 and 18. Like that's a good time for us. She's gonna feel confident. She's gonna feel energized. She's gonna whatever. But like just knowing where she is important. And even knowing like, hey, can I look at your calendar? Is that okay with you? Like, can we be on the same page with this? And like, not in an offensive way, but just like, I want to support you. I think that's something that a lot of guys could do that wouldn't take much effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never even thought about doing that.
Yeah. No, why would you?
Why are you this way today?
Yeah. Oh, wait. And I think it just helps them to know, like, hey, like there are changes that you're going through that I don't have to go through, and like this is not your fault.
I'm just consistent.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's we are so consistent. That's why I only work with women, mostly because men are really easy. Like men don't take much effort to get them right, but women there's a lot more moving parts that have to be dialed in, and it just nobody wants to do it. It's just not nobody, but most people don't want to do it because it's a lot.
Yeah, they're complex.
Yeah, and you got to get at the mental aspect of like why it's happening.
Right.
And why they don't want to do it, or why they think they can't do it, because if they're not going to be successful, they don't want to try it. But if they think they can be successful, why would they not want to be healthier?
Yeah.
It's just they lack the confidence to do it, or what to do. They don't
We
know.
got to push the ideas on day 7 to 18.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just wait for the perfect timing to do the idea.
Yeah. And then execute, and it'll be fun. But yeah, going like on dates, or doing like, even if they're exercise, if she's exercising, don't encourage her to do a bunch of intense exercise on the ends of those cycles. Like it's going to be more detrimental than it would be helpful.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, dude, it's been great hanging out. Great having fun golfing.
Super fun.
So
hopefully next time I can be more helpful. The golf game.
Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna go practice, but not too much because I got to take care of my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be like me. I'll win it for us.
There you go.
But yeah, guys, go hit up Austin. Go check out his Instagram. He can help you out, help your wife out, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
See ya.